Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are pulling back the curtain on something, well, honestly, it's a little bit invisible, but it is a highly engineered world. And it's designed to control your two absolute most valuable assets, your digital behavior and, of course, your wallet. Look, I want you to be totally honest with me for a second here. You tell yourself, okay, just 5 more minutes. And then suddenly, it's 2 a.m., you are deep down a TikTok rabbit hole. Or, maybe you're frantically adding some limited edition blind box toy to your online shopping cart because you just absolutely have to know which little plastic figurine is inside. Hey, don't worry, this is a safe space. We have all been there. But here is the secret you really need to hear today. That feeling of lost time or that sudden crazy impulse to spend, it's not a personal failure. Not at all. It's actually a meticulously designed trap. It's the intended outcome of a system built by literally some of the most brilliant behavioral psychologists on the planet. Get this, 95 minutes. That is how much time the average user spends on TikTok every single day. I mean, think about that. That's over an hour and a half, just gone, without even trying. And that absolutely doesn't happen by accident. It's the direct result of weaponized behavioral psychology. So to really understand how they pull this off, we've got to look at the very first layer of this whole matrix. Okay, let's dive right into this. Have you ever heard of the Zeigarnik Effect? It's named after a Soviet psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik. And it's basically this psychological tendency for our brains to remember and honestly fixate on incomplete or interrupted tasks way better than completed ones. To put it simply, the human brain absolutely despises open loops. When a task is unfinished, it creates this mental itch, like a low-level cognitive tension that your brain is just desperately begging to resolve. So here's the exact neurological sequence of how the Zeigarnik effect captures your attention. First, you initiate a task. Then you get interrupted. Your brain retains that open loop, and that right there gives you the motivation to seek closure. It's this super rapid cycle. Now think about infinite social media scrolling, or say a Netflix cliffhanger. Those are perfectly designed interruptions. The feed literally never ends. The story never quite resolves, so you are permanently stuck at step 2, and your brain is just screaming for step 5. Platforms actually weaponize this psychological itch by delivering these rapid, totally unpredictable bursts of dopamine. You see, unlike a 2-hour movie that actually builds to a single satisfying conclusion, short-form video gives you a hit every 15 to 60 seconds. Bam, bam, bam. Every single swipe is a tiny, unresolved mission. And your brain, it just cannot resist that rhythm. It's constantly seeking the closure of the next video, which keeps your thumb moving indefinitely. But here's the thing. This architecture of urgency isn't just used to hijack your time. It is absolutely used to hijack your purchasing power too. So let's peel back the second layer of the matrix here, scarcity marketing. This is a strategy that leverages limited availability or strict time constraints to trigger a massive fear of missing out. Good old FOMO. When we perceive resources as limited, our brains actually bypass rational evaluation altogether and just go straight into survival mode, loss aversion. Brands manufacture this urgency specifically to hijack our rational decision-making and, you guessed it, accelerate our impulse buying. And this right here brilliantly maps out the psychological pathway of a massive cultural phenomenon. Specifically, we're talking about Pop Mart blind boxes and the viral Filipino Anik-Anik trend. Now, Anik-Anik basically refers to this huge cultural love for collecting small, sentimental trinkets. Well, Pop Mart took this existing cultural desire and basically injected it with extreme scarcity marketing because you don't know which figure's in the blind box. And because certain figures are incredibly rare, it creates this manufactured scarcity. And that directly forces consumer impulsivity and overconsumption. You aren't just buying a toy anymore. You are buying the sheer thrill of a scarce opportunity. Now, it's really important to understand that there are different flavors to this manipulation. On one hand, we have supply-based scarcity. Think Pop Mart's limited editions. This creates a sense of identity, status, exclusivity. You want it because no one else can have it, right? But on the other hand, we've got demand-based scarcity. This is like when an e-commerce site flashes only 2 left in stock while you're looking at a hotel room. This triggers pure competitive panic. It completely relies on the bandwagon effect, making you think, oh man, if everyone else wants this, I better grab it right now before it's gone. Even if, you're literally just booking a random Tuesday night in Ohio. The research on Pop Mart's growth reveals something pretty startling, honestly. It notes that the emotional excitement of opening a blind box without knowing what's inside triggers a psychological response similar to the thrill of gambling. This is the terrifying power of variable reward schedules. Whether it's the sheer uncertainty of what physical toy is inside a box or the uncertainty of what video is going to play when you swipe up on your phone, that unpredictability of the payout turns e-commerce and scrolling feeds into highly, highly addictive slot machines. Which brings us to our absolute deepest layer today: dark psychology and dark patterns. Now, I know, dark psychology sounds like some kind of late-night internet clickbait, but it actually describes very real, scientifically backed patterns used by digital platforms all the time. It is the systematic application of cognitive biases to control your behavior completely invisibly. It's persuasion without outright conflict. It's like, making the cancel subscription button almost totally invisible. You don't even realize you're being subtly directed. And to really understand how dark this gets, you have to consider the sheer volume of behavioral data an algorithm like TikTok's recommendation engine tracks in real time. Guys, it's not just what you hit like on. It is tracking your watch time per video. It notes if you rewatched the first 3 seconds. It tracks your pauses, your hesitations, your scroll speed. It even tracks whether you swipe fast or slow. According to the data, within just 35 minutes of opening the app, the algorithm has tracked enough of these microsignals to build an incredibly accurate psychological profile of your specific vulnerabilities. It knows what makes you laugh, what makes you angry, and exactly what makes you stay. So why go through all this insane effort? $118 billion. That was TikTok's ad revenue in 2023 alone. Whenever an app is free, you really have to remember that the product isn't the app. The product is your hijacked attention. Every single minute they keep you in that Zeigarnik loop, every little dopamine hit they deliver, well, that's a minute of your focus that they can neatly package up and sell to advertisers. So the crucial point is this: when evaluating the ethics behind these tactics, researchers summarized the reality perfectly. They said marketing as a whole is largely made up of the kinds of things they're talking about. It seeks to spread the use of manipulation tactics rather than genuine communication. It's honestly just a regular part of doing business now. From your social media feeds straight to the online checkouts, the ultimate goal is always conversion and retention, often completely ignoring any sense of ethical consumer welfare. But what happens when that digital illusion finally breaks? Welcome to the hangover of urgency. When the high of that scarcity-driven impulse finally fades, whether you just spent 3 hours scrolling or you bought 5 blind boxes you didn't actually need, it turns into this heavy cognitive dissonance. You experience decision fatigue, buyer's remorse, and a pretty profound loss of trust in the brand or platform. Short-term manipulation might drive a quick sale or a super long session, for sure, but it ultimately leaves the consumer feeling tricked and, frankly, exhausted. Which leaves us with this final, truly vital question. When your feed is quite literally functioning as a slot machine in your pocket, and your purchases are being actively engineered by algorithms and scarcity timers, who is really in control of your next click? Reclaiming your digital agency starts with actually seeing the strings. So the next time you feel that urge to just keep swiping or that rising panic to buy before a timer runs out, just pause. Recognize this architecture of urgency at work and decide for yourself if you really want to play their game. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning what's on your screen.